Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in on a Friday night. Not a lot of people here on Zoom, but we're streaming on the Facebook, so you never know when someone's going to show up. And so I like to do them no matter what's going on. If it's a holiday or balls of fire falling from the sky or whatever, people might still want to tune in for a little bit of wellness. Kraig Smyth, MyBizGuide, Business Being Human, your friendly neighborhood wellness advocate, the outdoor guide for your inner journey, the business consultant for the business of being you. Trying all my lines out. This wellness workshop is reevaluating value. So value, what a concept. What concept of value. That is such a critical understanding. And of course, I'm writing my book, Business of Being Human, and there's a lot about value in there. And if we say, ready? Are we all ready? Okay, here we go. Talk about business and pre-capitalism, pre-colonialism, pre-commoditization, pre-disposable era. We talk about business or trade in smaller groups trading with each other. And I say that trade is an important part of our species development, actually. And if we think about trade and business, same thing, is an integral part of the development of our species that's facilitated the growth of such things as communication, teamwork, leadership, process development, bridging of cultures, and understanding of value. If we think about value, if you think about value, it could be said that we're not really thinking about value, or that everything thinks about value. Talking about business and investment and energy investment, right? If we say energy is our first commerce, we all have a natural monitor on our energy expense. Just like a bass in a pond knows instinctively that it's got the same amount of energy to catch a 2-inch minnow as it does a 4-inch minnow. And the 4-inch minnow is a better return on its investment. Same with, you see lions on the plains of Africa chasing gazelles. They get the young ones or the old ones or the wounded ones because they know that they've got a certain amount of energy output and they want to maximize their energy output. So if we think about value in those terms, these animals are understanding value, to put it that way. Everything has such a deep connection to value. In the wintertime now, a lot of trees lose their leaves because there's not a lot of sun and it's not conducive to creating energy. So they'll save the energy they have for times when there's more sun available, and for the sun to turn their nutrients and water into photosynthate in the leaves via photosynthesis in the chloroplasts, all the 7th grade science and arborist stuff. So there's cycles there also, and that's cycles, another important thing, one of these natural laws that also shows value. And so there's cycles that interconnect. As a matter of fact, if we talk about carrying capacity of natural habitats, the different cycles and different organisms cycling at different times allows each habitat to carry a maximum amount of organisms. So as some organisms are in a peak cycle, other organisms will be in a low cycle. So that allows the maximum amount of organisms to live in X habitat. And so that's maximizing the value of that habitat. Value is also found in some of the more human-centric, of course, right? We'll fast forward to the printed currency aspect. And The printed currency, how valuable is printed currency? If we understand, actually, let me back up. Let me back up just a minute here. Um, before we get into the printed currency and words, because there's really good lessons of value there. Another thing that's super valuable is to understand some places in the human ecosystem where we have blockages, and getting rid of blockages is super important. So getting rid of um, preconceived ideas, egocentric narratives, false narratives, all these sort of things. That is a huge value if we understand how our natural mental ecosystem works. And if we understand dams, and we have dams in a river that block river flow, or if we have clogged arteries, everyone knows about clogged arteries and our human physical ecosystem. Those are blockages. So if we have things that we've picked up in contemporary society, like these ideologies and such that we'll get into and that you've probably heard me talk about a lot, it's important to get rid of those, because that lets our flow happen. That lets our cognitive process happen and our energetic process happen better. So one of those huge constrictors of flow is printed currency and the concepts around printed currency. And a lot of people, if we start talking about value, the printed currency is one of those things that comes up. But when we go through and we have a more holistic understanding of value, we're adding context to the concept of value. That's increasing our flow. And in essence, just like increasing our understanding, adding context is increasing our understanding. We can also say that adding context is increasing the diameter of the river of information that's flowing through our mind. So we're letting more flow happen. And there might always be some blockages, but if we increase our understanding, we have more flow to go around those blockages. Big catch is when people only relate value to printed currency. And since we're in a highly commoditized society, this is a real problem. And when people talk about value, it's going straight to printed currency. But we already went over a few core aspects of value, of real value, of naturally occurring value that supersedes and has preceded the printed currency aspect of value since maybe time began on this planet. So that's a pretty valuable concept to have, right? If we can look at value in a more holistic form, it gives us the leverage to create some space between ourselves and these blockages, these dams in contemporary society that we're all affected by. So there's another aspect of value. What's the value of us comparing notes and understand? What's the value of understanding? By having conversations like this, we're exponentially increasing our value. We're sharing, we talk about business again, and yes, energy is our first commerce. So all right now, we can say that we're all doing business because we're all contributing our energy to this group. This group is a business model. We're all contributing our energy, we're holding space for it. And during these conversations, we grow our understanding. That's growing our value. That's growing our interpersonal value. And it's growing our value as a collective, because when we grow this, we invest in this business, we understand, and then we can go off and trade these concepts with other people. And it also allows us leverage when we're just speaking with other people, even if we don't directly trade. Hey, the bass and the lion also know value, even if we don't make direct quotes from this. We still have that leverage, and we can see when other people are stuck in ideologies surrounding value or incomplete concepts surrounding value, right? I say a lot that our species won't solve its problems with written law or printed currency, right? We can't buy or legislate our species into the future. So that's a critical thing to understand. And when we talk about printed currency and capitalism, I mean, capitalism is missing the key fundamentals of business right off the bat. And so I'll go make that distinction because a lot of people don't understand the difference between business and capitalism. So I like to say it like this: that business is creating something of value and exchanging it for something of fair compensation. If an entity is taking something of value and not giving fair compensation, then that entity is simply using the concept of business as a guise to plunder, right? It's not reciprocal. And if you think about it, everything is fair trade. Everything in life is fair trade. And in business, we can't really step on our business partners, or then we won't have business partners, right? The cannibalistic capitalism is not sustainable. But in nature, everything trades to encourage sustainability. And if we say natural laws, sustainability, connection to everything, challenge, balance, ebb, flow, all those are all work together in that sustainability model also. And the fair trade is a super key component to that. This reciprocity, there's got to be reciprocity. We're all invested here. And so another thing about trade, I'm giving away all my trademarked material here, but when I say trade, traditional, reciprocal, authentic, directional, empowering. When we're having communication with someone, that's like a cheat sheet. To know where you stand with someone, tap into your emotional intelligence, do the traditional, reciprocal, authentic, directional, empowering. Is that how this communication feels? Right? And that obviously, the only one that I ever need to explain a lot is the traditional part. And when I say traditional with a capital T, going back pre-colonialism, pre-mass commoditization, pre-disposable era, when people were in smaller groups and we had to trade, or we wanted to trade, was probably a better reflection on what was actually happening. When we wanted to trade with different groups, we were in smaller groups, sometimes far apart. When people came from long distances with only what they could carry or have their dogs drag, we weren't able to take a whole 7-Eleven with us, or a whole Walmart with us, or a whole Costco with us. It was just a few important goods. But when people came from so far away to trade, not only were those physical trade items valued, but the people themselves were valued more, right? And one of these common things in business is that scarcity is a huge contributor to how we perceive value, right? So understanding that scarcity aspect and being in, this is why it's important to look at our species on a holistic view, on an evolutionary time frame. When we had lower populations, each person was more valuable. So we might not get along with everybody we might not get along with everybody. No one gets along with everybody, but each individual had more importance to the group. And when we were in small groups, there wasn't a swipe left. We were kind of stuck with each other in a lot of in a lot of instances. We could look at it like that. And I think it's important to kind of put ourselves back in that place, because ultimately we are stuck with each other as humans. We're the same species. And so that lesson of traditional, and to put ourselves back and to regrow that value that we have as individuals, that's in essence, that's still there. It might not seem like it on one level because there's so many people, but the lessons still there, and those lessons of integrity, those lessons of reciprocity, those lessons of respect. So when we say traditional, reciprocal, authentic, directional, empowering, the first part of the traditional is to put ourselves in that place where we had a higher value proposition to each other. And then when we're communicating, reciprocal is a conversation helping everybody involved? Is it central conversation? Is it a topic that's beneficial to everybody? And does everybody have their space in it? Is everybody recognized in it? Obviously, in this conversation, I'm doing most of the talking. But if it wasn't this format, when we speak, we want to leave space for other people and make sure that everybody's heard. So that's the reciprocal part. And then the authenticity part is, even if the is the speaker not so much factually independent study, triple blind, linear data accurate, but are they speaking from a point of authenticity? Are they doing their best to reflect the concepts fairly and in a fair light without an angle? Just to present, and this is what I try to do. I try to present the information and let whoever's listening sift through it, on their own. There's no expectation of making a decision, or is it right? Is it wrong? Is it mostly accurate? Is it partially accurate? Whatever. But is the presenter presenting something just fairly, not trying to con you into anything, no agenda behind the conversation? The other part is the directional, which is there a point to the conversation? Kind of gets back to the reciprocity aspect. Is there sort of a goal? Is there an objective? Is there some value that's being created for everybody during the conversation? And then the last part is the empowering part. When you're speaking with someone, is it empowering? Is the concept empowering? And I think it goes back to these other parts. Is it beneficial to the listener? Is everybody that's engaged realizing benefit from the conversation, right? Is it somehow empowering to us? And I'd like to think that the understanding part's the empowering part, because if we understand something, we can better address any challenges. And that a key to understanding is a key to addressing challenges is understanding. So I try to submit that into the conversations, that if we're growing our understanding, we're better able to address challenges. And in contemporary society, one of the biggest challenges we have is that societal engagement with printed currency. So if we can get some more context around value, we can start to leverage the concepts of printed currency around a little bit better and help people that are so stuck on that printed currency model. Because really, the biggest value is to human, or one of the biggest values to humans, I think how humans perceive value, is our wellness, is our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual wellness. just wellness with a capital W. Is that word, that's a valuable word, right? That word's reflecting a lot. And when we say reflecting, words and printed currency are both doing the same thing. Words and printed currency both don't have a lot of intrinsic value. They reflect value of things that they reflect concepts of things that do have intrinsic value. So printed currency, words, they both don't hold value on their own. They only reflect value of other things, and only in certain circumstances and only up to a certain point. Printed currency can never reflect the true value of things intrinsic to life, like food, water, air, shelter. I like to throw in physical, mental, emotional, spiritual wellness, right? Those things, those foundations, those things that we need for life. But yet, those things get trespassed on consistently in contemporary society for the pursuit of printed currency. That is a mental illness. That is a human frailty. That is addiction. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But it's misunderstanding. It's not understanding value in its complete form, right? And what did we just say? We said that the things intrinsic to life get trespassed on consistently in contemporary society. But wait, isn't it big business? And isn't that capitalism doing that? So capitalism doesn't understand value. So capitalism misses value right off the bat. And the only way that these things are ever going to be reconciled is if people, what? Anybody? Is if everybody actually understands these things. We are not going to be able to mandate integrity. We are not going to be able to mandate understanding. So through our own volition, through us understanding the value of understanding, we can start to speak to these things, and we can start to say, hey, this capitalism thing, it's not fair trade, right? It's not fair trade if businesses are destroying things intrinsic to life, and life with a capital L, life for people, life for other organisms, the carrying capacity of this planet as a whole, the wellness of this planet as a whole. That is simply because people generally, the general population does not understand value. Because these things only happen through a lack of understanding. And if misunderstanding or a lack of understanding is the problem, then the obvious solution is more understanding. So if we can reevaluate value and give some more understanding to ourselves, we're growing not only our own wellness, because no one wants to be an addict, no one wants to have this constricted relationship with printed currency when we can understand our energy is our first commerce, and understanding energy exchange and our energy investment. We can understand things as energy, as value, and see all these natural examples of efficient usage of energy. Then we're looking at nature, we're not sucked into the human frailty and the human addiction and that component. So another good lesson for understanding nature. And again, another commercial here for the business of being human. It's going to be done in only a year, so don't hold your breath. But another part of that is where nature flows through business, and actually isn't nature the first model of business with all the intricate webs? When we say interconnectivity and interconnecting ecosystems, Those are all trade. Those are all ecosystems and organisms within the ecosystems trading with each other to create the perfect business model. That's the planet that we live in and on. And that's what we are. We are composed of interconnected ecosystems and organisms trading within us, and we're in essentially an organism, the planet, again composed of interconnected ecosystems that allow our own interconnected ecosystem to live. So understanding nature and relating to natural systems of trade, right? All these interconnected ecosystems, they're all trading with each other. So corporate illness, that capitalism is the sickness, that is the pathogenic aspect to business. And it just, when business comes into human form, we've done it since humans been humans. And now there's just a little big, big aspect of sickness. So if we can understand and contain where that sickness is, we can start to heal. We can start to make changes and things. Little trick here. If I say the word bank, what do we think of? Do we think of a place to put money? Or do we think of a place where the river meets the land and the edge of a lake? Or the edge of the ocean? Because there's a river bank. When we say bank, we should probably be thinking of a river bank. But because we're so exposed to contemporary culture, we've got these disconnects flowing through us. You know, there's another lesson from natural science is that you can't have a healthy organism in an unhealthy habitat. So understanding our habitat, understanding our collective consciousness and the things that most people are relating to on a daily basis. I'm going to throw in the government, money, and clocks. We're going to be talking about the money, but those are inorganic objects. To understand how nature works and to understand the evolution of our species, those are inorganic objects taking up space, taking up a lot of space in our mental ecosystem. So as a natural organism, we're not really relating to those things on a holistic, sustainable level. They're inorganic, they're getting in the way. And if we really tune in with ourselves, everyone knows that. Everyone knows that contemporary society is not sustainable. Everyone knows that colonial governments don't work, that mandated behavior doesn't work. So recognizing those things clearly is of huge value. First, we heal ourselves, then we can start to heal our community. By providing context, by providing different understandings or old understandings of value, by reacquainting ourselves with actual value, we can start to transcend the anxiety around contemporary society, right? Contemporary society is addicted to written law, clocks, printed currency. Addicted when we've got an unhealthy relationship with something. We've got an unhealthy relationship with substance. That's how everyone's used to it, right? It's the difference between poison and medicine is the dosage. It's okay if someone has a drink once in a while. It's not okay if they're drinking all day. It's okay if someone looks at a clock once in a while. especially when it's cloudy out, right? It's like, okay, but when we're living within that constraint, it's too much. It's abuse of that. It's okay to have ideas of how societies work together. It's not okay to mandate those things. It's okay to have placeholders. It's okay to have value placeholders. People have had value placeholders forever. People have used shells and stones and just plain tablature to keep track of goods that have been exchanged. But we're not coveting these hash marks on a piece of paper. We're not coveting these beads and these shells. Those are just a way to keep track. So we're talking about the place of what is the place of printed currency. It's just to keep track. It's just a value placeholder. It's easier to have some smaller coins. If we think about the history, it's easier to have some smaller coins or pieces of paper or what have you to represent trade items, especially when the trade items might not be in close physical proximity. It's a lot easier to carry a credit card than 50 pounds of dried salmon and a buffalo hide. And what if everyone's already got buffalo hides and dried salmon? Printed currency or value placeholders allow trade to happen, especially now, allow trade to happen more diversely. And that trade, that interaction with different people, there's more to the business than just the exchange of goods. When we talk about global commerce, think about the positive aspects of that. That's bonding nations. You think any business wants to not be in good trade relationships with another country? Even countries that people say, oh, well, they've got a, bad humanitarian aspect. They've got bad humanitarianism, or they've got poor environmental regulations. But still, there's connection between different countries. And if we don't have connection with each other, then we don't have any kind of chance at growing each other. So the international trade and trading to different people in different places, it's more than just the goods and more than just the printed currency. And if we take a look back to the pre-colonial models, if we think, geez, we were all in smaller bands and pretty much used to each other, right? And not just to meeting other people would have been a really big deal. We take it for granted now. But meeting people from different cultures, we'd have different experiences to trade, and even different partners. And if we talk about trading genetic material, to put it that way, if we're all in the same group and have seen everybody of dating age in our group, and then there's another group over here, that was a critical part of relationships between traditional cultures, is so to keep the genetic pool viable. I mean, that's real science, contemporary science. Just natural instinct, of course. Contemporary science is always going to just Columbus everything and show what people have known instinctually forever. But to take those lessons of traditional trade and realize that they're still happening now. So that printed currency, that's just a placeholder. That's just a small part. That's just a small part of the whole trade concept and the business concept and the trading goods, that sort of thing. So understanding the value of business in itself is an important value, because if I say business, how many people have a negative connotation of business? A lot of people do because they're thinking about it in terms of capitalism. And when I say trade, everyone's like, oh, just go back to trade. Yeah, we just need to trade stuff. That's not what I'm saying. Printed currency is not bad. We can't blame our problems on inanimate objects. It's the use of it. It's the use and the abuse of it. It's the human immaturity in the use of the printed currency. It's a human immaturity to understand when the tool can't trespass on the task that it was created for. Printed currency, or now we don't even have printed currency. We've got a little piece of plastic and it's just all in the cloud. We type in the computer and it says, oh, I've got 159.3 shells in my account, 159.3 pretty rocks in my account. It doesn't need to be anything. And I think that this is the real value of printed currency, is in its lack of value. And coming into the digital age, that we're just keeping track on a screen. We're just keeping track on a screen. So what are we really accumulating? Numbers? Where's the value? When people lose track of the value and what we're trying to achieve, that's a disconnect. That's the immaturity. And like I said, business is growing something of value and exchanging it for something of fair compensation. But first, we're growing something of value using this social model, this social conversation, these wellness workshops. We're all investing our time, investing our energy, investing our thoughts. We're growing our understanding. So that's valuable. We're trading our understanding out. That's valuable. We're growing our own wellness. That's valuable. As a matter of fact, I remember an old issue of Success magazine, of all places, said the most valuable thing that you can bring to your workplace is your energy. That's Success magazine. Fast Business. A lot of those places, people don't know, a lot of those places really do have a good handle on some triple bottom line understandings, not just economic, but also environmental and social. And really, environmental is the foundation for everything. And then our social, and then our economic is on top of all that. And we can even use the word economic holistically and understand the economics of a healthy environment, economics of a healthy mental ecosystem, a healthy emotional ecosystem, a healthy spiritual ecosystem. Those things are creating value. And the words that we use, the words and the printed currency, again, they don't hold intrinsic value. They only reflect value up to a certain point in certain circumstances. Like we said, the printed currency can't really reflect the value of things intrinsic to life, like food, water, air, shelter, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual wellness. And also the words can only reflect concepts up to a certain point. And if we pay attention when we're talking about concepts that are really integral to our mental, emotional, spiritual facets, the words will fail to reflect how valuable some of the conversations are. And we can point to them, we can use our words as pointers, and lots of scripts have been written about spirituality. And those words, another critical understanding between the use and the abuse of our tools, our words and our printed currency as a tool using organism, as a tool using species. Those words that we use can point to things that can help us understand ourselves, that can help us understand our mental flow, our emotional intelligence, our spirituality, but they don't hold those things intrinsically. I think this is an important point to make for understanding value in spirituality and talking about book book-centered religions. And people say, well, it says right here in the book. It's like, yeah, but that's a book. Those words don't hold spirituality. They can help someone understand some, but they do not hold it intrinsically. Words do not hold spirituality. In fact, spirituality is in the now. That has to be in the present. And as a writer myself, and I love to write, and writing is a very powerful tool, but it is just a tool. But once we write something down, it's past tense. So did everybody catch that part? When we write something down, it's past tense. And real life is in the now, is in the present and going forward. So we can look back at some things that we've written, but we have to keep those things in context. So some of those huge sticking points, some of those huge blockages that people have are around words and printed currency, but they don't really have value within themselves. They're only as valuable. Their value is dependent on the user, just like any tool. How we use our tools, that's how valuable they are. Dependent on the user. It's all dependent on the user. And a good tool user knows the threshold of use and abuse. What's the point where the tool I'm using is no longer effective? In the wellness advocacy landscape, I see so many people trying to label their thoughts with words as they're going through an experience. It's like, no, just be quiet. Experience what you're going through on an energetic level first. Have the experience, have the full experience. But that shows anxiousness, so common in contemporary society. And anxiousness and addiction are hand in hand. People wanting to fill that void. People don't have a label for the feelings that they're feelings, for the feelings that they're feeling. Well, there's a point that we need the integrity to understand that we don't want labels on those things. We don't need a label on everything. We don't need to assign a dollar value to everything. There are some things that transcend the printed currency's ability to reflect value. There are some things that transcend the word's ability to reflect the concept. And it's important to know where that threshold is, because when we don't know that, then we're stepping on those things that are truly valuable, and we are stepping on them and we're covering them up with the value placeholders. Words and printed currency are tools that are commonly abused, and abused in a way that they're covering up the true concepts, and they're covering up true value. Anybody have any questions at this point? Comments? Need me to repeat anything?
No, I really liked what you said about you can't mandate really or good behavior. I was really laughing. I wanted to just like, wow, I used to say, because that's really true. It's like you can't mandate all that stuff. And I would say, and you can take that to the bank and cash it, or cash my little saying. I was like, well, does the bank really have value? Talking about value, right? And it's like, where my mind would be to think, well, that's money, that's where there's money, and you can take, but that's really true. When you were saying everybody knows that you can't mandate good behavior, you can't write laws and policies and say don't do it,
Yeah, I
it's
can't
not
mandate
it's not
behavior.
natural.
That's like that's like when we say that colonial governments don't understand human habitat or habit. That's one of those big key things to say, yeah, you can't mandate behavior. And you can see the addiction in contemporary society. Well, what else are we going to do? People will go crazy if this, if this, if this. It's like, yeah, well, that's someone that doesn't understand. That's someone that needs to sit down and reacquaint themselves with human behavior, because it's our own volition and through our understanding is that we have cohesive societies. And as a tool using species, our understanding, our cognitive thought process is the only way that people have got to be people. And so why not work with our most valuable tool in the understanding? Hello? Not understanding human habitat. But of course, we just got done with the whole series on narcissism, EDU, and colonialism, and people engaged in cognitive dissonance and pushing that around. So if someone doesn't want to think about something, and they don't want someone else to think about someone and something, and ultimately you got a bunch of thinkers forcing other people to not think either. Despite this is the only asset that human beings have that's worth a shit, basically. But why? Because people don't think about this whole thing. I mean, am I saying anything super profound? I mean, this is basic shit. This is basic. People are thinking species. That's how we got here. Seriously, does everyone not know that? I mean, really. Did anyone else have anything to say before I keep rattling on? Nothing, Doc? Kimberly is always quiet. She's probably doing dishes or something anyway. All right.
I'll wait. I feel like I always interrupt you, so I'll just wait.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so working with our understanding, that's our value. That's valuable. We need to understand things. When we understand, then we're embracing X concept on our own volition. Like I said earlier, here's the conversation. Here's my contribution to this concept. Put it out here, and if it resonates, if it makes sense, then people can call it their own. Then if it's someone's own, if someone embraces a concept, so if something resonates with someone on their own volition, then that's part of our mental ecosystem. That's part of our consciousness. That's part of our understanding. It's something that makes sense. And that, does it make sense or does it not make sense? Does it work or does it not work? Is a critical component of our species. Looking at our species as a species, looking at our species as another organism on this planet that is intricately connected to value and energy exchange. And does something work or does it not work? Contemporary society says right or wrong. That's a common concept. But I like to say that the origin of right or wrong is, does it work or does it not work? And that's always what we're doing. And that's our cognitive thought process, is basically doing that. When we're presenting concepts, we're basically, our cognitive thought process is going, does this work or does it not work? Does it fit? Does it make sense? Or does it not? Everything, there's a pattern recognition in there also. And if we understand pattern recognition, When something makes sense on a cognitive level, there's an emotional component that goes along with that. Our emotional intelligence goes along with that. And pattern recognition, we can see everything's got pattern recognition. That's why the bass knows that it's better off to chase a 4-inch minnow than a 2-inch minnow. That's why the lion can tell the difference between a sick and injured gazelle or an old gazelle and know that that's the better investment of its energy. That's pattern recognition. And that's transferred, who knows, right? But isn't that amazing? Like that instinct, that pattern recognition is like a core part of life. And then through the trees, it's a form of pattern recognition that the trees drop their leaves at a certain time. It's a form of pattern recognition that the seeds wait until the soil warms up to a certain temperature to start germinating and pop up through the ground. So our pattern recognition, what works and what doesn't work, what fits together, our understanding, our own volition. If we buy into something on our own volition, using that term, buy in on an energetic level, if we make that relationship with ourselves, say ourselves with our 12 facets that make us up, maybe I'll get into that another time. All the tools that we use to understand ourselves is valuable. Those are valuable. So yeah, the mandated behavior doesn't work. Why force something into doing something, period? Because life doesn't work under a mandated behavior model. Nothing wants to be caged. Nothing wants to be domesticated. This is based on a human frailty. This is based on, back to the last 7 weeks of Narcissism EDU. This is someone who's not in tune with themselves. It's not in tune with what naturally resonates and the value of being in tune with what naturally resonates, to start to trespass on their own intellect, aka egocentric pursuits. And here's the addiction part, and here's the anxious part. People trespassing on their own volition, people trespassing on their own abilities. The cognitive dissonance is ignoring our instinct, our objective thought process, our emotional intelligence, our ancestralism, our natural instinct to look inward, to understand ourselves. And when we ignore that, there's a void there. And then it's the classic filling voids. And most people know addiction for substance, but it's also ideologies. It's an ideology, and it's an ideology that we can just tell other people what to do and they'll do it and it's going to be okay. Even if maybe in concept it's accurate, it still has to be based in individual understanding. So understanding how our species works is extremely valuable. Understanding how life works on this planet is extremely valuable. Looking at ourselves from the lens of a species is extremely valuable because we get a bigger vantage point. If we understand what a foundation is, and if we understand that our thought process is based on foundation, right? We stack one thing on top of the other. So we want the biggest base. We want the biggest common denominator of understanding. and then we can grow on top of that. So the biggest common denominator is that we're an organism on this planet. And then the next common denominator would be where this species science says homo species, homogeneous. And then we get to be whether we're whatever gender and whatever race and whatever. But it's important to have that concept. And if our species is out of a line, we can look at other species to get back on track. We can look at these natural laws. We can look at natural flow in the environment to regrow that connection, to see how our flow's blocked up and what's blocking our natural flow. If we look at natural flow in the physical, we understand blockages of flow if we understand lessons of flow in our external physical and habitat, rivers, of course, are the quintessential one. And then, of course, we understand blockages of flow in our inner physical habitat, right? We don't want blocked arteries. We don't want to put a rubber band around your wrist, right? We don't want to block circulation. So then that's our physical ecosystem, but then we've got energy flow and we've got our mental, emotional, spiritual ecosystems. But understanding the mental ecosystem is an easy way to start talking about what works, what doesn't work, start talking about flow, because we've got our cognitive thought process. Because we can say, oh, okay, here's some pattern recognition. This plus this equals this. Does this make sense? Does it not make sense? Here's why it's important. And we can do these explanations that can help us recenter and start connecting to ourselves on a holistic basis. So important, extremely valuable to understand our natural habitat. And in fact, if we're talking about an organism, which we are on this planet, right? No disagreements, right? See, this is easy stuff. No disagreements. We're all an organism on this planet, right? We're all on the planet. Okay, that's a big foundation. Someone could argue, but they're full of shit. So let's just say that that's what's going on. Well, if we take some basic lessons from contemporary science says you don't understand an organism unless you understand the environment that it evolved in. So that means we have to start looking at natural habitats. And if we start looking at natural habitats, then we can see where we've got some human-centric habitats. And we know our physical internal ecosystem, that's modern medicine. So we've already got some good markers that modern medicine works. There's real stuff there because it's recognizing a natural physical ecosystem. And how does this ecosystem work? Okay, so it's not a huge jump to say, well, what about our consciousness? Well, then we've got our mental ecosystem, our emotional ecosystem, our spiritual ecosystem. And if we understand things like the connection to everything, right? Our physical ecosystem is connected to our physical external ecosystem, and our mental internal ecosystem is connected to our mental external ecosystem, right? Our consciousness is connected to our external consciousness. Our personal, I'm using these terms internal and external, but they're connected. Our own emotional intelligence is connected to the emotions of others, as well as our spirituality. So there's some basic understandings there, an understanding environment, that connection, that interconnectivity, that connection to everything with Takayasi. Sustainability, balance, ebb, flow, cycles. We can see all those things in our own biology, in the natural biology. And if we understand some of those things, we can see some clear connections and disconnections. If we talk about ebb and flow and carrying capacity, carrying capacity is another important understanding, well, I guess it is kind of a natural law. It's definitely a natural occurrence. But if we take the the ebb and flow and apply that to ourselves and compare that with the systems that we're in right now, the systems don't recognize that. The colonial human management systems, the colonial governments don't understand human habitat or habit, and especially that ebb and flow. And capitalism doesn't understand that ebb and flow or that carrying capacity. Ebb and flow, there's a push cycle, there's a energy expenditure cycle, and then there's a rest cycle to recharge. But if we think about the colonial society model, it's just go, 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 get, which of course there's the reflections of addiction again. But it doesn't work because we're not letting ourselves recharge, right? Why isn't there 3 days on, 3 days off? You know, and then the bank account brain, it's just accumulate. Nothing's like that. And in fact, printed currency doesn't have a natural timeline. So talking about the clocks, printed currency doesn't have a natural decomposition rate. If we talk about time, right, understanding these things, understanding their values and their lack of values. If we talk about time, well, we've got cycles and we've got sun and moon cycles and how light it is and how dark it is for how long. And we've got seasonal cycles and we've got our own lifespan. That's our real time, is our lifespan. But to get outside ourselves, a lot of traditional cultures say 7 generations. Look 7 generations ahead. 7 lifespans. How are things going to be in 7 lifespans? Act like we're going to be alive for 7 lifespans. How would that affect decision making in contemporary society? Right? Who's going to be here? If you act like you're going to be here 7 generations from now, people would make maybe different decisions. But it shouldn't have to be us personally. We should have the integrity to act on behalf of everything and not just humans. But our own time span, that's real time. Our own lifespan is real time. And our energetic cycles. How much carrying capacity do we have? Right? Carrying capacity in its raw form is, oh, I can pick up a 50-pound stone and move it so far, but then I'm going to have to set it down. I'm going to have to recharge, and I'm going to have to pick it up, and I'm going to have to carry it again. So that's a natural cycle of ebb and flow. If we're talking about very emotionally charged or emotionally filled conversations, and we go on for 3 hours, we might need a little bit of a rest after that. We might not be able to do 8 hours of emotional conversation in a day. In fact, interesting talk about energy. I think most people can do 8 hours of physical labor in a day much easier than we can do 8 hours of direct, valuable conversation in a day. So, recognizing our own carrying capacity, our own ebb and flow, our own cycles, and isn't there lessons of boundaries in there? And how valuable are our lessons for boundaries? Our lessons of boundaries are dependent on understanding our own natural cycles. Here in bear country, how valuable is it to be bear aware? Right? How valuable is it to just be aware? We're talking about awareness. There's good physical examples like fishing in bear country. You're trying to catch a fish and make sure you don't get caught by something bigger, right? The natural life cycle. There's something really empowering about that. There's something very freeing about that. There's something very naturally aligning about that, to be trying to catch something and make sure you don't get caught at the same time. You can tell that's how we developed. If you're out there and you do that and you tune in, you can understand those things. And it's very aligning. It gives us a very good concept of real life. To be with that awareness, and that extreme awareness is largely gone in contemporary society. So again, the place to imagine ourselves in natural places, if we're going to get back on track and take some of these traditional lessons, the way our species developed over the last 300,000 years for our species and 3 million plus years for our genus, according to science. But it's a good placeholder, right? What science says about our species, those are good placeholders, but let's not get too stuck on them. But if we use them as placeholders, they're valuable. If we argue about, oh, well, it's actually only 299,000 or 301,000, that's not the point. That's worthless. But to understand the place of awareness, and if we're aware of our external ecosystem and habitat, or is the awareness of our internal ecosystem and habitat, and these things in our subconscious, and these things in our consciousness, what's that addiction to printed currency? What's that addiction to clocks, written law? Where is that? Is that in our consciousness, or are we perpetuating it in our subconscious? Is everybody so mad at contemporary society, but that disconnect is not clear in their consciousness of why it doesn't work? Because understanding a challenge and embracing a challenge and growth 101 is that we have to identify a challenge. Everyone's, oh, look what's happening to America. Look what's happening to America. It's like, why are you surprised? America was built on far worse than what's going on now. Well, that means that people don't have a good handle on the challenges. People, oh, I hate working every day, all day. But if I say government's money clocks, it doesn't resonate with people. Well, you're relating to a clock. It's not part of your natural ecosystem. So that's one thing. So some of these things, they're elephants in the room. And if we don't address the elephants in the room, it only gets us stepped on and shit on. So if we were aware enough to paying attention, if we were aware enough in a natural system to be watching out for grizzly bears while we're going about our daily job, would we have that awareness in our mental ecosystem to see, oh, here's some things that aren't natural in my natural ecosystem. Here's some things that are blocking the flow. Here's where I have an unhealthy relationship with these tools. And here's the places where society is just run on the ideology of force instead of working with the natural ability of our species to actually understand. That understanding is a big value. If we can understand what works and what doesn't work, that's a big value. If we can understand why things work or don't work, that's a big value. So let's reevaluate value. And let's bond with our own volition. And as a tool using species, let's use our most prominent tool, our brain. Let's grow our understanding and increase our value to ourselves and others. And don't forget, it's the individual that makes the society. Society is a reflection on the individual. If you want society to change, look in the mirror. Growing yourself is the best way to make societal change happen. If we understand these things, it's easier to not get stuck in cycles of addiction, and it's easier to help other people out of cycles of addiction and perpetuating false narratives. If we understand where things aren't working, we're not going to perpetuate false narratives, and we're going to help other people not perpetuate false narratives. So, thanks everybody for joining us Friday night. On Friday Night Wellness Workshop, Reevaluating Value. Kraig Smyth, your host. You know where to find me. And now we're going to cut off the Facebook and go to the after party. So, see you later, Facebook. It's been real. Thanks for hanging out again. Much appreciated, everybody. Have a good night.